a good one here, and eventually we will. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Help promote and rank up my channel. I'm doing a review on the first 4 episodes of Doom Patrol Season 2, and as I'm playing catch-up, I'm mostly just going to be glossing across along the best, worst, and mixed aspects of these episodes, because I can't go too in-depth. But I will start off with the best things about this really are just Chief elaborating on the history of Chief, everything there with his daughter, and the way they elaborate on Larry Trainor. Larry Trainor's character, I feel, is the one story that is providing the most substance, while Robot Man's character is providing the most entertainment. These two characters, excellent portrayals of these characters. I do have gripes, but if you watch my Season 1 reviews, you can see what those gripes are about Larry Trainor's character, what they've changed about him for the sake of the show. But for the most part, all the characters look great, as they should. But the first episodes, it's really just the visuals and the comedic antics of Robot Man, like wearing rat skin and just his attitude towards things. Those are really the best highlights there. The elaborating on the history of the Chief and giving us more of Larry Trainor / Negative Man, giving us more of his character. Those really are the best things. Cyborg, though, going his own way for the first couple of episodes wasn't something I was particularly fond of, but it was curious to see where he would go. Elastigirl, too, I'm really fond of her state of mind, her positivity about wanting to learn to control her powers and be more helpful and stuff like that. So I'm been really interested in Elastigirl, Larry Trainor's character, what they're doing with him, because that provides the most substance, and Robot Man's character, because that provides the most entertainment. And there's a lot of mystery and stuff surrounding, like, the Chief's daughter and the character she speaks to. So there is a level of intrigue in there, and this does involve, like, the Chief giving up the necklace that grants him his immortality. So now he's having to deal with that, his mortality, but he's also having to deal with trying to figure out how to be a good father. And this show always heavily hits on the father's aspects. The fathers in here are pretty terrible characters, and it just puts fathers in a bad light, because all these fathers in here do ridiculous, horrible things. But the women also, that it can't be ignored, that the women aren't given some kind of radiant light where they're reflected in such a positive manner either. That you can see this show's really got daddy issues. Moving on from that, really there wasn't a lot of substance and a lot of cool things to talk about within those first 3 episodes. It wasn't until episode 3 that things really started to pick up and get interesting with the villain they introduced in that one. But that is pretty much just self-contained. They contained that within that episode. So it goes right back to, I feel like the show doesn't have a direction yet to really drawn out, and it is really character driven. It doesn't have this clear plot, this clear focus moving forward. I don't feel that it does have a clear focus moving forward. Obviously, it's going to revolve around father figures and Chief trying to figure out how to be the best father he can, but also while trying to figure out the issues with his daughter and what she's capable of with the wishes she make, and about, I really think it's going to be about the guidance of father figures, our mentors, and we'll see how it goes, if he's going to fell her or not. I do feel that he's going to fell his daughter in this interpretation. But beyond the good stuff, yeah, it's just a lot of the beyond the episode 3 villain and the depictions of Robot Man and Negative Man and Larry Trainer, like what they're doing with those characters. Beyond that, because episode 3 was really exciting with Cliff actually going to confront his daughter and let him know that he's alive and all that. And while I think it was episode 2 that dealt with Larry Trainer having to go visit, find out that his son's passed, and you know, go to the funeral and all that stuff. There's really a lot of like family substance there. I do not like what they've done with Jane's character so far this season. Her character, I really kind of wish that another primary would just take over full time, because her character has not been interesting to me, and I just feel like she's a hopeless loser because she just wants to keep shooting up and injecting herself and resisting leaving things behind. And I can understand where her character is coming from, because to her, these guys are her family. The Doom Patrol is her family, but the characters that have been bound to her all her other personalities, they're like, you're supposed to be our family and not put them before us, and you're making things dangerous for all of us. So there is a slight level of intrigue in there, but I mostly find that story not that interesting, and Crazy Jane's story is just not that interesting this season. Every other story, though, I'd say I'm pretty interested in it, though it does feel like it's very heavy on like filler material and going through the motions, and that it's not really action-packed or exciting or all that fun yet. Now, when we get to episode 4, this episode is just flat out outrageous and hilarious. And you got the sex patrol there, pretty much. I imagine on R-rated Ghostbusters, and you'll have that. Now, a lot of this episode was pretty uncomfortable for me, because, you know, it really is that far left LGBT stuff, and I know a lot of people that watch the show are probably into that, because this show, it was that kind of comic book with full of all kinds of craziness. But I don't find this stuff all that particularly interesting, and it's really not for me. So episode 4 was pretty unappealing for me. I wasn't really that into it. I just found it flat out completely absurd and ridiculous the majority of the episode. I was interested in what was going on with Dorothy, Chief's daughter, where that was headed. I was pretty much only interested in that aspect of the episode. The rest of the episode I was not really interested in, and it was pretty ridiculous and uncomfortable and unappealing in a lot of different areas. But it was pretty like shockingly slapstick humorous in certain areas, with, you know, the ghosts doing each other and the sex patrol being like a rated R version of Ghostbusters. But beyond that, let's get into what the stuff I really like. Stuff I have my own personal bias about, like the stuff going on with Cyborg meeting this woman and him trying to stop. First of all, I don't think Cyborg needs to go off on his own. I wasn't particularly fond of that. I was glad when he came back to the rest of the Doom Patrol, but I didn't like the whole scene where a mugger tried to rob the girl he was interested. He defeated him. He was going to have the cops, but she insisted that he needs to let that criminal go, because you're just going to keep him in the system and all that. And I don't agree with that, because like Cyborg said, this is this dude's like third offense, and he's got a whole list of crimes he's committed. I don't agree with her talking Cyborg into letting this guy go. He made his choices. The criminal made his choices. This is what superheroes do. They get criminals. They apprehend criminals. And it just felt like really relevant to all the stuff going on right now with BLM and all that. Acting like the justice system is just a horrible thing, and we need to just take it easy on criminals and let them go. So like, it's really relevant to all the stuff going on now that I frown upon. So I didn't like how that was injected into the episodes and stuff. Of course, these episodes were written before all this nonsense broke out, so I can't really say that it was pandering, but it does feel like it was pandering, and the people that write this show are obviously in that category of politics where they lean that direction. The other stuff I didn't like, Danny the Street, yeah, I've done reviews on Danny the Street before. I've had my gripes about the first season episode. People weren't particularly fond of my gripes about it because I called it pandering, because I believe the character, not Danny himself, but the character that gave up on his army team and hid there in Danny as a cross-dresser or transgender, whatever you want to call it, that character, I just felt like it was poorly written, and it was just overt pandering, and nobody had the balls to criticize it because the subject matter it dealt with. So I got some negative thumbs down on that episode. But this episode, I'm not particularly fond of them. I get what they're trying to do in this episode, which is, bring back Danny, bring him back to how he was, and that's the reason for the whole party and stuff. And I'm just not particularly fond of watching this kind of stuff, like guys making out because I'm straight. That doesn't make me homophobic not wanting to see it. It's just, I want to say I'm pretty sure there are gay people that don't want to watch straight people make out either. But there were quite a few things in this episode that I just didn't like. I felt it was really crazy and ridiculous. I get what it was meant to do, and it did what it was meant to do, and it moved some things forward. The most interesting aspect was Dorothy in this episode. But other than that, I feel like the show needs to flesh out more of a plot. Yes, it's a character-driven show, but the worst things for me is that perhaps it's too character-driven. It needs to really focus on fleshing out a plot from the start so we know where we're going. Obviously, like, I'm not heavily familiar with the comics, so I don't know the exact direction we're going in. Maybe everybody knows the direction we're going in, but the first episode should really heavily highlight the direction we're going in, and maybe it does by, showcasing that Dorothy has these voices she talks to, and one of them's real dangerous, and we gotta make sure she doesn't make those wishes. Maybe that's the whole point of the season, just trying to keep her from doing that. But ultimately, I don't feel like it's made clear enough the direction we're going with this season. It just feels like a bunch of characters going through the motions. It's not as good as season 1 was so far, and I think that it really needs to push them towards the direction in which they become heroes. It needs to do more of that. And obviously, it's kind of doing that with Elastigirl. And I don't really know what direction Cyborg's going to go in himself. But I feel like it just needs to be a bit more clearer with the plot. Yes, it can be heavily character-driven the way it was in Season 1. But they need to kind of clearly lay out a plot from the get-go. And slowly build towards that. And maybe they're doing that, but it just doesn't feel like it. It just feels like too much going through the motions, in my opinion. Episode 3 was the strongest, was the absolute strongest of all 4 of these episodes. And I would probably, rate episode 1 like just average 5 out of 10. Episode 2, average 5 out of 10. Episode 3, I would probably give like an 8 out of 10, while episode 4, I'm not really sure, because it's just, so much. There's just overloaded with so much ridiculousness. I guess a 5 at best. It is really silly, and it's hard for somebody like me to rate it because I'm just not into LGBT stuff. So it's hard, and I'm not into like pornographic style stuff. Like this episode really gets sexual and stuff. I'm not really into all that stuff. Like all the overtly sexualized stuff. Like I'm not into that kind of stuff. So for me, this episode is a negative. But I'm sure a lot of people will probably praise this episode and greatly appreciate it at the same time. So, like I said, you know, for me, this season really needs to pick up. It needs some clear direction. It needs to stop going through the motions and be a little bit more clear and concise on where it's headed. Yes, these characters are a mess, but the show doesn't have to feel like a mess just because the characters are. And right now, it does feel really sloppy. And it is kind of jarring, too, because we had, you know, all the Alan Tudyk, Mr. Nobody voiceover and stuff in the first season, and we don't really have that kind of stuff this season. So it is a drastic change this season from the first season. And I kind of feel like it just needs to be a little bit more clear and concise, and the characters need to be given a focus that isn't just misery. Like a clear focus that isn't just misery. With that said, I'm going to keep trying to stay tuned in for this season, but I don't know how many episodes I can take that are like the last episode, episode 4. I don't know how many of those episodes I can take like that. If there's too many of them, I'll probably tune out. If there are too many of them that go that far, I'll probably tune out. But other than that, I'm really interested in seeing what happens with Dorothy. Really interested in seeing what happens with Dorothy. And really interested in seeing if Elastigirl can get her stuff together. And I kind of want Jane to be replaced with another primary, because I'm just burned out on the character. She hasn't proven to be all that interesting this season. I think it would be for the best if a different primary took over, but due to what happened in the last episode, I doubt a different primary will take over. But it's going to be interesting to see if Jane gets some kind of real focus and stuff, where she's just not just drowning in herself. And Cyborg, I want to see him have more than just the pursuit of some girl and his feelings on that. Robot Man, I'm not sure where we're going to go from here with him, or Negative Man, but I don't want us to feel like we're walking back stuff that we've already accomplished or overcome. And sometimes it feels like this show walks it back a little bit too much. They need to just get over their stuff. That's how I kind of feel about it. Anyways, big good one here. Eventually we will. Comment down below. Let me know your favorite and least favorite moments. And you know, I know there's going to be some gripes about some of the stuff I said with all the LGBT stuff. Of course there always is. You know, people don't like other people having their opinions, and people don't like honesty. People don't like honesty, and everybody wants to walk that fine line where we act like we're all perfect or something, and whatever, you know, virtue signal, whatever. But I call stuff out where I see it, and if I don't like it, I don't like it. I don't care that it's about LGBT people or whatever. It doesn't set well with me. I don't think it's well executed. I think it's really in your face and a little bit much for certain people to handle. Bet, like, subscribe, share. Thanks for viewing. Be a good one here. Eventually we will stay awesome. Rock on.